The highway stretched endlessly beneath the hum of the wheels, ribbons of asphalt illuminated by the dim orange flicker of sodium streetlights. The world felt half asleep, a liminal place between night and nowhere. Diesel fumes hung in the air like a ghost, and the rhythmic thrum of 18 wheels became almost hypnotic, lulling the driver into a trance that wasn't quite rest, but not yet wakefulness. The radio had gone silent hours ago, nothing but static and faint echoes of stations that didn't seem to exist anymore. Outside, the fog thickened, and the moon hung low, smudged like a thumbprint against the sky. Ray hadn't slept in nearly 20 hours. His eyes burned, bloodshot from caffeine and strain, but he pressed on. Deliver the load. Keep moving. That's the unspoken code of every trucker who's watched the horizon swallow time. When the highway signs began to blur, he decided to pull off at the next exit. The road bent sharply, leading him to an old truck stop that wasn't on any of his usual routes. The flickering neon sign read, "Rest Easy Diner and Gas. Open 24 hours. The letters buzzed and sputtered, some half-lit, like the place had forgotten what decade it belonged to. As he slowed the rig into the lot, the gravel crunched under the tires. A lone pickup truck sat near the far pump, its windows dark, engine off. Inside the diner, pale fluorescent light flickered behind fogged windows. The clock on Ray's dashboard read 3:17 a.m. That hour when reality feels thinner, and the world holds its breath. He killed the engine, and silence rushed in like a wave. For the first time all night, the noise in his head, the white noise of the highway, stopped. But with the silence came a strange sense of awareness, as if the night itself was watching. He rubbed his face, tried to shake it off. "You're just tired," he muttered, opening the door. The air outside was damp and cold. Each exhale became mist that hung in the stillness longer than it should have. The diner's bell chimed faintly as he stepped inside. The place smelled of burnt coffee and old grease, the kind of scent that clings to your clothes for hours. A woman stood behind the counter, wiping a mug that looked older than both of them. She glanced up, her expression polite but vacant. "Coffee?" she asked in a flat tone. "Yeah," Ray replied, settling into a corner booth. His boots left faint tracks on the checkerboard floor. The place was empty, no other drivers, no trucker chatter, no music. Just the faint hum of an old refrigerator behind the counter and the occasional creak of the building as the wind pressed against its frame. He looked out the window toward his rig. The fog was thicker now, swallowing the pumps and the sign outside. The waitress poured his coffee without looking at him. Her hands trembled slightly. "Quiet night," he said, trying to make conversation. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she stared at the dark glass of the front door, like she was listening for something. Finally, she said softly, "You shouldn't stop here too long." Her words lingered longer than they should have. Before Ray could ask what she meant, a sound drifted through the diner. Faint, but unmistakable. The squeal of brakes outside. A slow creaking noise. He turned toward the window, expecting to see headlights pulling in, but there was nothing. Just fog and the distorted reflection of his own face staring back at him. "Did you hear that?" he asked, but the waitress had disappeared into the back. The sound came again, closer this time. It wasn't a vehicle. It was footsteps, heavy, deliberate, crunching across the gravel outside. Ray's pulse quickened. He told himself it was another driver, maybe someone heading inside for coffee. But no shadow passed by the window. He stood, heart beating unevenly, and peered through the glass. His truck was there, barely visible, but something about the shape in the fog made him freeze. A silhouette, human, standing beside his rig. The figure didn't move, just stood there, one hand resting against the door handle of his truck. Then, slowly, the door creaked open, even though Ray knew he had locked it. He pushed through the diner door, calling out, "Hey!" The cold hit him instantly, biting through his jacket. The fog swallowed his voice whole. He jogged toward the truck, but when he reached it, the door was shut again. Locked. He pulled on the handle, checked the latch, everything was secure. No sign of anyone. No footprints on the gravel. He looked around the lot, empty. The old pickup he'd seen earlier was gone. The diner's neon sign flickered violently, buzzing like an insect caught in glass. When he turned back toward the building, the waitress was standing at the window, staring out at him. Her face was pale, eyes wide, as if she could see something behind him. Ray turned slowly. Nothing, just fog. When he stepped back inside, she spoke before he could. "You saw it, didn't you?" Her voice cracked slightly. "Saw what?" "The shadow. Comes with the fog." She looked toward the counter, where an old CB radio sat, faint static whispering from its speaker. "You're not the first one to stop here tonight." Ray frowned, uneasy. "What are you talking about?" The radio crackled, the static thickening. Then a whisper, faint, distorted, but unmistakable. "Ray." He froze. His name. The voice had said his name. The waitress backed away slowly, shaking her head. "You should go," she whispered. Ray turned toward the door, pulse hammering, adrenaline overriding exhaustion. He ran to his truck, started the engine, and pulled out of the lot without looking back. The fog seemed to follow him, thickening in his mirrors, stretching for miles before it finally thinned near dawn. Hours later, at a different stop, he tried to tell another driver about what happened. The man listened quietly, then said, "That place burned down back in '98. No one's been there since." Ray didn't respond. He just stared at his reflection in the truck side mirror. For a moment, it seemed like the faintest outline of another face hovered behind his, barely visible in the fogged glass. And somewhere, faintly, through the static of his radio, a whisper returned, "Keep driving." The rain came down in sheets so heavy it seemed to erase the world outside her windshield. Jenna gripped the steering wheel tighter, knuckles pale under the flashing arcs of lightning. The wipers moved uselessly, smearing water more than clearing it. She was 3 weeks into her first solo long-haul trip, and she was already starting to understand why most truckers hated night runs in the Midwest. The endless dark, the isolation, the sense that the road could just swallow you if it wanted to. Her dispatcher had told her to stop for the night, but the next truck stop was 20 miles ahead. So when she spotted a faded sign for 1 mile marker 237, showers, fuel, 24-hour cafe, she didn't think twice. The exit curved sharply, leading into a narrow service road lined with dying trees that swayed violently in the wind. Her headlights cut through the rain just enough to reveal an old gas station, 2 diesel pumps, and a small building with a flickering red open sign. She parked the rig carefully, shutting off the engine, and the silence that followed was almost too heavy. She could still hear the rain hammering on the roof, but underneath it was something else. A faint metallic rattling, as if something was brushing against the trailer doors. She tried to ignore it, grabbing her coat and flashlight before stepping out. The wind slapped her hard the moment she opened the door. The ground was soaked, puddles reflecting the dim yellow glow of a single floodlight that buzzed overhead. She jogged toward the restroom building at the far end of the lot, boots splashing, rain stinging her face. When she reached the door, she noticed how worn it was. Paint peeling, hinges rusted, and a single word scratched into the metal near the handle. "Don't." Inside, the restroom smelled faintly of bleach and something metallic. One fluorescent bulb flickered above, casting a sickly white light that pulsed with each crack of thunder. There were 3 stalls. She picked the one farthest from the door and sat down, exhaling. The quiet here was almost comforting compared to the roar of the storm outside. She pulled out her phone, no signal. Of course. Then she noticed something odd in the mirror's reflection. Words carved into the glass above the sink. She squinted to read them through the flickering light. "Don't look under the stalls." Her stomach dropped. It felt like a joke, something left by a prankster long ago. But something about the way the words were carved, deep, deliberate, uneven, made her uneasy. She laughed softly under her breath, trying to shake it off. "You're tired. You're just jumpy." That's when the door creaked open. Jenna froze, heart pounding. She looked down, spotting the shadow of boots entering the restroom. The steps were slow, heavy. Water dripped onto the tile. Whoever it was didn't head for a sink or another stall. They just stood there. Seconds stretched painfully long. She could hear her own breathing, shallow and uneven. Then, without warning, the boots turned slightly, now facing her stall. Jenna swallowed, trying not to make a sound. Another minute passed. Then another. The boots didn't move. Just stood there, inches from her door. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. She bent forward slightly, glancing down, and froze. The boots were there, facing her. But there was no body attached. No legs. No shadow above the ankles. Just empty air. She bit down on her lip to keep from gasping. The light flickered once, then went out completely. Total darkness. The rain roared outside, and somewhere near the sink, something began dragging across the floor. Her breath hitched. The air grew colder, like a freezer door had opened. Then, in the pitch black, the stall door rattled. Once, twice. Slow, deliberate movements. She pressed back against the toilet tank, too terrified to move. The rattling stopped. A voice, faint, breathy, right above her, whispered, "Don't look." Jenna's pulse exploded in her ears. She squeezed her eyes shut, trembling, and waited. Then, as quickly as it started, the noise stopped. The lights flickered back on. The floor was empty. The boots were gone. She waited another full minute before unlocking the stall and stepping out, legs shaking. The mirror caught her reflection. Pale, drenched in sweat, eyes wide. Behind her, faint smudges of wet footprints led toward the door. But they stopped halfway. She pushed through the exit and sprinted back toward her truck, rain soaking her through. When she climbed in, she locked the doors immediately and started the engine. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. The windshield fogged up fast, and when she wiped it with her sleeve, she thought she saw a shape move across the far edge of the lot. Tall, thin, and still wearing those same boots. She floored the accelerator and didn't look back. It wasn't until hours later, at dawn, when she stopped again at a crowded travel center, that she allowed herself to breathe. She went inside for coffee, still shaken, still thinking about those boots. The cashier, noticing her shaking hands, asked if she was okay. She laughed it off, muttering something about a weird night on the road. The cashier frowned when she mentioned the rest stop. "Mile marker 237? He asked. She nodded. He looked pale. "That place isn't open anymore," he said quietly. "Hasn't been since the accident. Some trucker went missing there 2 weeks ago. They found his rig still idling in the lot. Doors locked, lights on, but no driver." Jenna stood there frozen, the smell of burnt coffee filling the silence. She didn't say another word. When she got back to her truck, she glanced once more in the side mirror before pulling out. And for just a moment, in the fog of her own breath against the glass, she swore she could see a faint outline, the shape of 2 boots standing right behind her seat. The wind outside the truck stop carried the scent of rain and gasoline, a lonely perfume that clung to the night. Earl sat in his usual booth, the corner one beneath the buzzing neon sign that bled red light across the tabletop. He'd been a trucker for nearly 40 years, long enough to see highways built and towns die. Now retired, he still came here every Thursday night, out of habit more than hunger. The waitress, Marlene, brought him his regular slice of pecan pie and a mug of black coffee without asking. "Still can't kick the road, huh?" she teased softly. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Outside, the rain started again, a gentle drizzle tapping against the wide glass windows. The place was nearly empty. Just him, Marlene, and a young couple whispering over pancakes near the door. It was peaceful, the kind of quiet that felt like a memory. That's when Earl noticed him, the man sitting 2 booths over. Red baseball cap pulled low, hands folded on the table, staring straight ahead. Earl hadn't seen him come in. He hadn't heard the bell chime above the door either. But there he was, still as stone, an untouched cup of coffee cooling in front of him. Earl squinted, trying to see his face, but the brim of the cap shadowed it completely. Marlene came by to refill his mug. "You get a lot of regulars around here?" he asked casually, nodding toward the man. She followed his gaze, then frowned slightly. Him? Yeah, he's been coming here for years, she said. Always sits there. Same order, same seat. Doesn't look like he eats much, Earl murmured. She shrugged, her tone distant. Maybe he's just waiting for someone. Earl smiled politely, but something about the man unsettled him. After Marlene left, he watched the stranger a moment longer. The man didn't move. Not once. Not even when the couple by the door got up to leave, their laughter echoing softly. When the diner fell completely silent again, the man turned his head, just slightly, and for the briefest moment, Earl thought the stranger was looking directly at him. He looked away quickly, feeling embarrassed, like a kid caught staring. But curiosity gnawed at him. He cleared his throat, gathering his courage, and called out, "Evening." No response. "Hell of a storm tonight, huh?" Still nothing. Earl sighed, shaking his head. "Suit yourself," he muttered, returning to his pie. He tried to focus on the sound of the rain, on the warmth of the coffee. But the silence grew heavier, pressing against him like a weight. He glanced back, and froze. The booth was empty. The coffee cup still sat there, steam long gone. But the man was gone. No sound, no doorbell, no movement. Just gone. Earl looked toward the counter, but Marlene was nowhere to be seen either. The diner suddenly felt colder. He stood, glancing toward the door locked. He frowned, trying the handle again. It didn't budge. His pulse quickened. "Marlene?" he called. "Hey, you locking up early?" No answer. The lights flickered once, then steadied. The silence was so absolute it made his ears ring. He turned back toward his booth, and his heart nearly stopped. The man in the red cap was sitting there again, in Earl's seat this time, head bowed, hands folded neatly in front of him. Earl took an involuntary step back, his throat dry. "What the hell?" The man slowly raised his head. The shadow of the cap still hid his face, but when he spoke, his voice sounded far away, like it came through static. "You're late, Earl." Earl's breath caught. Do I know you?" The man didn't answer. He just tilted his head slightly, the same motion Earl remembered from moments ago, or maybe minutes. Time felt strange now, stretched thin. A noise snapped Earl's attention toward the counter. Marlene stood there again, pale and trembling, staring at him with wide eyes. "Earl," she whispered. "Who are you talking to?" He blinked, pointing at the booth. "Him. The guy with the—" He stopped. The seat was empty again. Marlene shook her head slowly. "Honey, that booth's been empty all night." Earl's heart hammered against his ribs. "No, I swear, he was right there. Red cap, black jacket. You said he's a regular." Her face drained of color. "I said he used to be." She hesitated, glancing toward the dark window. "He died out on Route 12 years ago. Fell asleep at the wheel. Crashed his rig into a ravine." Earl turned toward the window instinctively, and for a moment in the reflection, he saw the man again. Sitting across from him, smiling faintly, red cap pulled low. The reflection blinked. Earl didn't. He stumbled backward, chair scraping the tile. The lights flickered, and when they came back on, the booth across from him was empty again. But the coffee cup was gone. He looked at Marlene, who was staring at the counter. "Earl," she whispered, voice shaking. "I didn't pour that cup." The rain outside intensified, slamming against the windows. Earl's hands trembled as he grabbed his jacket. "I think I need to get going." She nodded quickly. "Yeah, I think you should." As he stepped outside, the air felt colder than before, the kind of cold that sinks deep into your bones. His rig sat under the flickering streetlight, and for a second, he thought he saw someone in the driver's seat. Just a silhouette, wearing that same red cap. He blinked. It was gone. The drive home was long and quiet. The radio stayed off. Every shadow on the road felt too tall, every pair of headlights in the distance too close. When he finally parked at home, dawn just starting to break, he checked the passenger seat out of instinct. Sitting there was a diner receipt. His heart skipped. He hadn't ordered anything to go. He picked it up slowly, fingers trembling. The paper was damp, edges curling. In faded red ink, it read, "See you Thursday." Earl stared at it for a long time, unable to breathe. Then he looked into the side mirror, and behind his reflection, faint and transparent, sat a man in a red cap, smiling just enough to be seen. The light flickered outside. The engine turned itself off, and the world, for one long moment, went completely still. The night stretched on endlessly across the open plains, the kind of darkness that swallowed everything. The road, the horizon, even the stars. Tony had been driving for 16 hours straight, his eyelids heavy despite the 5 energy drinks and the low hum of his CB radio keeping him company. Channel 19, the trucker's lifeline, usually filled with chatter, jokes, road updates, voices calling out handles from across the miles. But tonight it was quiet, too quiet. He glanced at the glowing green digits on the dashboard clock. 2:46 a.m. The road ahead was nothing but fog and the faint reflection of his own headlights bouncing off it. He reached for the radio mic and thumbed the button. "Breaker 19, any of y'all out on I-40 tonight? Roads are slick as hell." Static answered. He exhaled sharply, setting the mic down. "Figures," he muttered. He'd been hauling refrigerated goods from Oklahoma to Nevada, a long stretch of empty highway that always made his mind wander. Sometimes he talked to himself. Sometimes he thought about his wife back home, probably asleep, unaware that her husband's brain was slowly unraveling in the loneliness of the road. He turned up the volume on the CB just for the noise. The static was oddly soothing. But then, through the fuzz, something shifted. A faint click, then a voice. "Tony." He froze, his hand hovering above the dial. The voice was faint, distorted, like it was crawling through layers of interference. But he'd heard it clearly. His name. He picked up the mic again, a nervous laugh escaping. "Yeah, right. Who's messing with me? That you, Red Eagle?" Silence. Then the voice again, closer, sharper this time. "Tony, you're not alone out there." The sound made his scalp prickle. He looked around the cab, as if expecting to see someone sitting beside him. "Okay," he muttered under his breath. "Enough of this crap." He twisted the volume down. The static vanished. A few miles later, just as he began to relax, the CB crackled back on by itself. "You missed the exit." Tony's blood ran cold. There wasn't an exit for another 15 miles. He slammed the radio off completely, his hands shaking slightly. He tried to focus on the road, but his eyes kept darting to the side mirrors. Each time he thought he saw movement, shapes just beyond the edge of the lights, shifting in the fog. After 10 more minutes, he gave in to exhaustion and decided to stop for the night. A rest area sign flashed ahead, dim and flickering. He pulled off the highway and parked among a few other rigs. The lot was eerily still. No footsteps, no engines idling, just the wind pushing against the trees. He leaned back in his seat, the silence pressing down on him. Then, from the darkness of his radio, came a faint whisper. "Left your lights on." His heart lurched. He reached to check the switch off. Everything was off. He stared at the black radio box, his reflection faintly visible in its glossy surface. The voice came again, clearer now. "I can see you." Tony's breathing turned shallow. He unplugged the CB entirely, yanking the cord free. For a moment there was silence. Then, a sound no unplugged radio should make. The faint hiss of static, followed by laughter. It wasn't a man's laughter. It was thin, breathy, too close. He turned, scanning the windows, his flashlight beam cutting through the fog. Nothing. Just the shape of other parked trucks fading into the mist. But when he swept the light across his passenger side mirror, he froze. There was someone standing a few feet away, tall, motionless, face obscured by darkness. "Hey!" he shouted, throwing open the door. The air outside was frigid, the smell of wet pavement thick in his lungs. The beam of his flashlight wavered through the fog. No one. He circled the truck once, every sense on edge. When he climbed back inside, he locked the door and grabbed his phone. No signal. Of course. He sat there in silence for what felt like hours, until exhaustion finally overtook fear. He reclined his seat, closed his eyes, and told himself he'd imagined it all. Just sleep deprivation and caffeine. But then the CB crackled again. This time there was no whisper, just his own voice, distorted, echoing through the static. Tony, Tony, Tony. He stared at the dark radio, cold sweat dripping down his temples. Then the voice shifted, deepening. Look behind you. Every instinct screamed not to, but he couldn't help it. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, and his breath stopped. In the reflection, he saw himself sitting there, hands gripping the wheel, just as he was now. But the reflection wasn't moving in sync. It turned its head slowly toward him, a fraction behind his own movement. And then it smiled. The CB went silent. Tony stumbled out of the truck, gasping for air, the fog closing in around him like a living thing. He could feel eyes on him, hundreds of them, from the shadows between the trucks. He ran until his lungs burned, until the rest stop was just a blur behind him. When he finally reached a small diner 2 miles up the road, drenched and shaking, the waitress looked startled. You okay, Han? He nodded weakly. Just weird interference on the radio, he said. She gave him a strange look. You still using channel 19? Yeah, why? Her eyes darkened. They shut that channel down years ago after a wreck on the 40. Driver kept talking to dispatch. Said he heard voices on the line. But the dispatcher said he was the only one transmitting. Tony's hands trembled as he reached for his coffee. She added quietly, they said the last thing that came through the speaker was his own voice, begging himself to stop the truck. Outside, through the diner window, he could see the faint outline of his rig parked under the fog-drenched light. The headlights flicked once, though he hadn't left them on. And just as he looked away, the CB mic hanging inside swung slightly, as if someone had just set it down. For the rest of the night, Tony didn't speak. He sat there listening to the faint hiss of the coffee machine, the rain tapping on the glass, and somewhere far away, a voice, too faint to be sure, whispering through static, still awake. Rain lashed against the windshield as Mark pulled into the dimly lit truck stop just outside Amarillo. He'd been fighting sleep for hours, and the rhythmic thud of the wipers only made it worse. The neon sign outside buzzed weakly, Last Chance Fuel and Diner, letters flickering as though the power was barely holding on. He parked his 18-wheeler beside a row of other rigs, their hulking silhouettes lined up like silent beasts in the storm. The air smelled of diesel, wet asphalt, and something faintly metallic, something that didn't belong. Inside the diner, the lights were a dull amber. A jukebox hummed in the corner, but no music played. Mark stomped his boots against the floor, dripping rainwater as he stepped up to the counter. Behind it stood an old man with a worn face and tired eyes. His name tag read Earl. Coffee? Earl asked, his voice raspy. Yeah, Mark muttered, rubbing his face. And maybe a slice of whatever pie you got left. Earl nodded slowly, as if considering the request. Haven't had a pie order in a while, he said, shuffling off. Most drivers don't stop here anymore. Mark glanced around the diner. Only one other person sat in the corner booth, a young woman staring out the window, her reflection faint in the glass. Her hands were clasped tightly around a mug of untouched coffee. Something about her posture was strange, frozen, as if she'd been sitting there for a long time. When Earl returned with the coffee, Mark asked quietly, That woman okay? Earl's eyes flicked toward her, then back to him. She comes and goes, he said vaguely. Never says much. Mark frowned, glancing again. But the booth was empty. Just a mug, still steaming, and a single wet footprint leading toward the exit. He shook his head. Weird, he muttered, taking a sip of his coffee. It was bitter, almost metallic. He grimaced, setting it down. The rain outside had turned into a steady downpour, streaking the windows and muting the world beyond. Earl leaned on the counter. You driving through tonight? Trying to, Mark said. Got a delivery in Flagstaff by morning. Earl nodded, then lowered his voice. You be careful out there. Some folks say this stretch of road, it's not right after midnight. Lot of trucks go missing. Lot of drivers too. Mark gave a small, humorless laugh. Yeah? Ghost stories to keep us awake? Earl didn't laugh. He just stared, eyes distant. You ever feel like you're being followed, even when the mirrors are empty? Mark hesitated, trying to brush off the chill crawling up his spine. Can't say I have. Earl gave a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. You will. Outside, the storm raged harder. Mark left a few bills on the counter and headed for the door. As he stepped outside, the wind hit him like a wall, cold and electric. He hurried back to his truck, climbing into the cab and slamming the door. The rain hammered on the roof like impatient fingers. He started the engine, the low rumble filling the silence, but something was wrong. His headlights flickered once, twice, then dimmed, as if something was draining power. He frowned, checking the gauges. Everything seemed fine, but in the side mirror he thought he saw movement. A figure standing just beyond the light, drenched and motionless. He blinked, wiped the fog from the glass. Nothing, just the rain. Mark shook his head, threw the truck into gear, and pulled back onto the highway. The road shimmered with water, the lines barely visible in the dark. As miles rolled by, the unease grew heavier, pressing against his chest. His mind replayed Earl's words. Some folks say this stretch of road, it's not right after midnight. Around 1:30 a.m. His CB crackled to life. Static hissed, then a voice. Faint, trembling. Can anyone hear me? Please, I can't find the exit. Mark grabbed the mic. Copy that. Who's this? No response. Just more static. Then, a sound, faintly human, whispering beneath the noise. Don't look behind you. He froze. The road stretched endlessly ahead, black and slick, but he couldn't shake the urge. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. For a split second, headlights flared behind him, close, too close. A massive truck, no more than a few feet from his trailer, barreling down the lane. Mark's heart leapt. He swerved slightly, trying to make space, but the truck stayed on him, lights burning like white fire. He grabbed the mic again. Hey, you're right on my back end. Ease up. Static. Then a voice. Low. Calm. You took her seat. Mark's breath caught. What? The voice didn't respond. The headlights blinked out instantly. Gone. No vehicle. No sound. Nothing but the wipers and the hiss of rain. He stared at the mirror, disbelief flooding him. The road behind was empty. He hit the brakes, slowing down, scanning the shoulder for signs of taillights. Nothing. The highway was utterly deserted. He tried to shake it off. I'm just tired, he whispered. Too many hours, that's all. But when he looked at the passenger seat, his stomach dropped. A wet footprint, right there on the vinyl beside him. He slammed the brakes, the truck lurching to a stop in the middle of the empty road. His breathing turned frantic. No, no, no. He threw open the door, stumbling out into the rain. The wind howled, slicing through his clothes. He circled the truck with his flashlight, the beam catching only falling water and asphalt. When he climbed back inside, the cab lights flickered once. Then he saw it in the reflection of the windshield. The woman from the diner, sitting silently in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead. Her hair hung in wet strands, eyes hollow and unblinking. Mark's scream tore through the storm as he stumbled backward, tripping down the steps of his rig. He hit the ground hard, scrambling away on his hands. But when he looked up, the truck's headlights turned off on their own. The cab went dark. He ran. By morning, State Patrol found his rig idling on the shoulder, driver's door open, radio still hissing faintly. On the passenger seat, a coffee mug, still warm, and next to it, a name tag. It read, Earl. Inside the diner that night, the old man polished the counter slowly, glancing toward the door as the storm continued outside. The jukebox came to life for a moment, unprompted, and played a song that hadn't been heard in years, soft, distant, lonely. And in the reflection of the window behind him, two silhouettes sat at the counter. One familiar, one new. Neither moved, The desert highway stretched endlessly ahead, a ribbon of black cutting through the emptiness. The air shimmered with heat even though the sun had set hours ago, and the only sounds were the hum of tires and the faint rattle of loose change in the cup holder. Jake, a long-haul driver in his mid-30s, squinted through the windshield. His eyes burned from exhaustion, but he was only an hour from his next delivery. He'd driven this route a dozen times before, the lonely stretch between Barstow and Needles, and it always felt like driving through a dream. The radio had gone dead hours earlier, no stations, no chatter, just static. His phone had no service, of course. He hadn't seen another vehicle for nearly 40 miles. The isolation should have been comforting. Peace, quiet, no one to bother him. But tonight it felt suffocating. Every passing mile marker seemed to blur into the next, each one looking exactly the same. He leaned forward, rubbing his temples. 1 more hour, he muttered. Just 1 more damn hour. The clock on the dash blinked 2:11 a.m. Up ahead, through the heat haze and the dim glow of his headlights, Jake saw something on the shoulder. At first, he thought it was a coyote or maybe a stray tire, but as he got closer, the shape shifted, human. A man, standing completely still in the middle of nowhere, one hand raised slightly as if waiting for a ride. Jake's gut twisted. "Hell no," he whispered, gripping the wheel tighter. Every instinct told him not to stop. But as he drew closer, the man stepped into the road. Jake slammed the brakes, the rig screeching as tires screamed against the asphalt. The man didn't flinch. He just stood there, illuminated by the high beams, tall, gaunt, his face half hidden by shadow. He wore a dark jacket that looked decades old, and a trucker's cap stained with grease. Jake rolled down the window halfway, shouting over the idling engine. "You okay, buddy? You need a tow or something?" The man tilted his head, his movements slow and deliberate. Then he smiled. Jake's stomach dropped. It wasn't a normal smile. It stretched too far, too forced, like a mask pulling at the edges. The man's voice was low, almost drowned by the wind. "You've been driving a long time, haven't you, Jake?" Jake froze. He hadn't told him his name. "Who the hell are you?" he barked. But the man didn't answer. He just pointed down the road. "You missed the turnoff." Jake looked past him. The road ahead was straight. No exits, no signs, just miles of black nothing. When he turned back, the man was gone. Jake's pulse hammered. He flicked the lights across the shoulder, but there was no one there. No footprints, no car, nothing. Just empty desert and the low hum of the engine. He sat there for a long minute trying to steady his breathing. "You're just tired," he whispered. "Seeing things." He shifted into gear and drove on, the truck's massive headlights cutting through the black. But something had changed. The air felt thicker now, the silence heavier. His headlights didn't seem to reach as far as before. After 10 minutes, he saw movement again. Someone walking along the edge of the road. Then another, and another. Figures. Dozens of them. They weren't solid. Their outlines wavered in the heat, as if made of smoke. Each one was wearing the same kind of cap, the same dark jacket. Their faces were pale, indistinct, but all of them were looking at him, watching as his truck roared past. Jake pressed harder on the gas, his hands slick with sweat. The figures lined both sides of the road now, standing shoulder to shoulder in the darkness, silent and motionless. As he passed, their heads turned to follow his truck in perfect unison. "God, no, no, no," he whispered, heart pounding. He dared a glance in the mirror, and saw them stepping into the road behind him, hundreds of them, their forms swallowed by the dust and exhaust. He kept driving until the fuel light came on. The gauge was nearly empty. Finally, in the distance, a faint glow appeared. A truck stop. Relief surged through him. He pulled in fast, engine rattling, brakes hissing as he came to a stop beside the pumps. But the place was deserted. The lights buzzed overhead, some flickering, others dead. The convenience store was dark inside, though the sign on the door read, "Open." A single payphone hung by the wall, its receiver swaying slightly in the wind. Jake climbed out, his boots crunching on the gravel. "Hello?" he called out. "Anybody here?" No answer. Just the whine of power lines in the distance. He walked toward the store, peering through the glass. Empty shelves. Dust floating in the air. He was about to turn back when the payphone rang. The sound sliced through the stillness. Sharp, shrill, mechanical. Jake froze. The phone continued ringing, each tone echoing louder than the last. He took a hesitant step toward it. His reflection flickered in the glass door as lightning flashed somewhere far off in the desert sky. He picked up the receiver. "Hello." A pause. Then a whisper. Broken, distant, like it was underwater. "You missed the turnoff." Jake's hand went cold around the receiver. "What? Who is this?" A faint laugh crackled through the line. Then silence. He slammed the receiver down, stumbling backward. But before he could move, every light in the truck stop flickered to life. The pumps, the signs, the store interior, all glowing a sickly yellow. And through the glass he saw them. Dozens of figures standing inside the store, packed tightly between the aisles, faces blank and turned toward him. They were the same, caps, jackets, eyes like black pits. Jake ran. He sprinted back to the truck, leapt into the cab, and turned the key. The engine roared, but something was wrong. The headlights illuminated the figures now standing in the parking lot, their expressions still, their bodies rigid. One of them, the man he'd seen on the road, stepped forward, stopping just at the edge of the light. He lifted his hand and pointed at Jake. The CB radio crackled to life. A voice, low and distorted, filled the cab. "You've been driving too long, Jake. You can stop now." The truck's lights flickered. The dashboard dimmed. The engine began to sputter. Jake slammed his foot on the gas, but the rig wouldn't move. Through the windshield, the figures were closing in, their shapes blurring, melting into the darkness. He grabbed his flashlight, his breathing ragged, and threw open the door, but the desert was gone. The highway was gone. He was surrounded by fog, a blinding white mist, endless and suffocating. The truck, the lights, everything vanished into it. He could hear whispers, dozens of them, circling him, whispering his name over and over. "Jake! Jake! Jake!" He stumbled forward, his boots sinking into sand that wasn't there a second ago. The whispers grew louder, closer, until one voice spoke clearly, right beside his ear. "You missed the turnoff." Then everything went black. When dawn came, a highway patrol officer found Jake's rig parked neatly beside an abandoned gas station, miles from any known route. The door was locked, the keys still in the ignition, the driver's seat empty. But inside the cab, on the dusty dashboard, someone had written in greasy finger marks, "We never stopped driving." And beside it, a faded trucker's cap, old, stained, and damp with desert dew. The rain had eased into a low mist by the time Carla pulled off the highway, her rig groaning as she eased it into the lot of an old truck stop that didn't appear on her GPS. She'd been running through the night, pushing her delivery hours past legal limits, and exhaustion had begun to gnaw at her nerves. Her eyes felt raw from the glow of the headlights, her hands trembling slightly as she cut the engine. For a few moments, she just sat there in silence, watching the fog curl and twist through the beams of her truck's running lights. The sign out front flickered erratically. "Big Sky Truck Haven." The paint was faded, the neon half dead, like something from another decade. She checked her phone. No signal. Again. The time read 3:07 a.m. Carla sighed, pushing open the door. The damp night air hit her face like a slap, carrying with it the smell of oil, rust, and rain-soaked earth. Somewhere in the distance, a lone coyote howled, its voice echoing across the empty plains. She adjusted her jacket, scanning the lot. There were other trucks here, at least half a dozen, but not a single light in any cab, not a single person moving. She called out softly, "Anybody awake?" Nothing. Her boots splashed through shallow puddles as she walked toward the diner attached to the station. The door creaked when she pulled it open. Inside, the air was thick and stale, like a place that hadn't seen customers in years. The fluorescent lights buzzed weakly overhead. A few tables were overturned, Napkins scattered across the floor, and an ancient jukebox in the corner flickered to life for just a second before going dark again. "Hello," Carla called out, stepping cautiously inside. Her voice echoed faintly. A bell dinged behind the counter. She froze. Then, from the kitchen doorway, a man appeared. Tall, thin, dressed in a grease-stained apron. His skin was pale under the yellow light. His hair slicked back in an old-fashioned style. "Kitchen's closed," he said flatly. Carla blinked, startled. "Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to. I just needed a place to rest. Long night." The man stared at her for a moment too long before nodding. "Coffee?" "Yeah, please." He turned his back, moving toward the percolator. His steps made no sound. Carla sat at the counter, glancing around. There were photos on the wall, truckers smiling beside their rigs, dated back to the 70s and 80s, all in black and white. The same man, the one making her coffee, appeared in a few of them, always standing in the background, always unsmiling. When he returned, she took the mug from him, her fingers brushing his. His skin was ice cold. She forced a smile. "You've been working here a while, huh?" His expression didn't change. "You could say that." She took a sip, wincing slightly at the bitter taste. "Guess you don't get many drivers this late, do you?" He glanced at the window, where fog pressed against the glass like a living thing. "They come, they go." Carla frowned. "Meaning?" The man tilted his head. "You'll see." Unease crawled up her spine. She looked down into her coffee and froze. Floating on the surface was something small and pale. A fingertip. She gasped, nearly dropping the mug. But when she looked again, it was gone. Just black coffee, rippling faintly. "Are you okay?" the man asked softly. Carla pushed the mug away. I think I should go." He smiled faintly. "The storm's bad tonight. You'll want to stay." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the fog. For an instant, Carla saw movement beyond the glass. Figures standing just beyond the light. Dozens of them, silhouettes of truckers. Their outlines faint but unmistakable. Her breath caught. "What the hell is that?" The man didn't turn. They always wait for the new ones. The lights flickered. The jukebox came on suddenly, sputtering out a warped tune from another era. An old country ballad, slowed to a crawl. The man stepped back into the shadows, his face fading into darkness. Carla stood, heart racing, stumbling toward the door. But when she looked outside, the fog had thickened. The lot was gone. The trucks, the sign, the highway, all swallowed in white. She hesitated, feeling the floor tremble beneath her boots. Then, faintly through the fog, she heard voices. Low, broken, whispering her name. "Carla, Carla, pull over." Her pulse hammered in her throat. She bolted out the door, her flashlight beam slicing through the mist. The voices grew louder, overlapping men, women, some crying, some laughing softly. Shapes moved within the fog, circling her. She sprinted back to her rig, yanking the door open and slamming it behind her. Her hands shook as she turned the key. The engine roared to life, but the windshield was covered from the outside by a thin film of condensation. Someone had written on the glass in smeared letters, "Stay with US." "No," she whispered, wiping it away. She shifted into gear, but the truck refused to move. The RPM needle twitched violently. Her radio came on by itself, filled with static. Beneath the hiss, faint voices whispered again. Dozens, hundreds, all overlapping. And then she heard her own voice. "Carla," it said softly, "you shouldn't have stopped." Tears stung her eyes as she stared at the speaker. "Who are you?" she screamed. The voice replied calmly, in her exact tone and rhythm. "You know who we are. You've driven this road before." The lights inside the cab began to flicker. Her reflection in the windshield smiled when she didn't. She screamed and threw the truck into reverse. The engine howled, tires spinning uselessly in the gravel. Then, with a violent jerk, the fog outside began to part, revealing the open highway again, endless and dark. She slammed the gearshift forward, flooring the pedal. As she drove, the fog fell away behind her, the truck roaring into open night. She didn't look back. She didn't dare. But in her side mirror, for just a moment, she saw the truck stop again, standing silently where it always had. Only now it was brighter. Every window lit up, every shadow inside moving. And at the counter, watching her fade into the distance, stood the man in the apron, smiling faintly. When the sun rose hours later, Carla finally stopped at a modern rest area miles down the road. She stumbled out, shaking, trying to calm herself. A few other truckers were there, chatting by the vending machines. She approached one, desperate for something normal. "You ever heard of Big Sky Truck Haven?" she asked. The man frowned. "Big Sky? Lady, that place burned down 20 years ago. Whole diner caught fire with everyone inside. They say the guy running it was found standing at the counter, still smiling." Carla's mouth went dry. The man looked at her curiously. "Why? You been there?" She didn't answer. She turned toward her rig, the morning sun glinting off the windshield. And just before she climbed back in, she saw it. Faint, like breath on glass, words appearing slowly across the inside of the window. "Come back soon." The storm had passed, but the world felt wrong. Too still, too silent. The desert sky stretched endlessly above, a black canvas with not a single star in sight. Diesel engines hummed faintly somewhere in the distance, though Ethan couldn't see another truck in the lot. He'd pulled into the rest stop around 3:30 a.m., bone-tired after hauling freight through the night. The place was called Red Mesa Stopover, according to the fading sign by the gas pumps, though half the bulbs were dead, and the paint was peeling away in long curls. He shut off the engine and sat for a moment, rubbing his eyes. The silence pressed against him like weight. No insects, no wind, no sound but the faint ping of his cooling engine. The air smelled faintly of rain and something else. Something metallic, sour, like rusted blood. He climbed down from the cab, stretching his sore back, and looked around. The gas station was a squat concrete building with a row of vending machines against one wall and a bathroom door that hung slightly open, its fluorescent light flickering weakly inside. Beyond the pumps, a long, narrow diner sat in darkness. Its windows were streaked with grime, but a single light glowed inside, warm, golden, inviting. Ethan hesitated. He didn't remember passing this stop before. He'd run this route from Tucson to Denver 100 times, but this place wasn't on any map he knew. Still, the thought of coffee, real coffee, was enough to drag him toward the diner. As he stepped closer, his boots scuffed against the wet pavement, each sound echoing unnaturally loud. The neon sign above the door sputtered to life for half a second. Home-style breakfasts. Then it died again. Inside, the diner was almost cozy. Almost. There were checkered floors, red vinyl booths, and the faint smell of bacon and coffee lingering in the air. But the warmth felt off, hollow. A jukebox in the corner was spinning slowly, no sound coming from it. Behind the counter stood a woman in her late 40s. Her hair pinned back neatly, her expression polite but distant. Her name tag read Marge. "Well, aren't you a sight?" she said with a faint smile. "Long night." Ethan nodded, removing his cap. "You could say that. Place open?" "For you, sure." She gestured toward a booth. "Coffee? Please." As she poured, the smell hit him, rich, familiar, comforting. He sighed, taking a sip. It was perfect. Hot, strong, exactly what he needed. "You don't get many truckers out here, do you?" he asked. Marge looked up, her eyes distant. "We used to," she said softly. "Used to be busy every night. But the road changed." He frowned. "Changed how?" She set the pot down, leaning slightly on the counter. "They rerouted it years ago. Most folks don't drive this stretch anymore." Ethan looked confused. Then, "How did I get here?" Marge didn't answer. She just smiled again, but her eyes didn't. "Eat something. You'll feel better." He laughed nervously. "Nah, I'll pass. I just needed a break." The jukebox clicked. The soft crackle of an old vinyl started playing. A slow country tune that bled through static. Ethan turned his head. It wasn't plugged in. When he looked back at the counter, Marge was gone. "Marge?" he called out. No answer. He stood, scanning the diner. The kitchen door was half open. A soft light flickered from within. Against his better judgment, he walked toward it. As he pushed the door open, the smell hit him first. Burnt grease, old meat, and something rotten underneath. "Marge!" A noise behind him made him freeze. The sound of boots on tile. He turned slowly. The diner was full. Every booth was occupied now. Truckers, men and women, all dressed from different decades. Old caps, flannel shirts, uniforms with names faded nearly white. None of them moved. None of them blinked. Each face was turned toward him. Ethan stumbled back, heart hammering. What the hell? Then, one by one, they began to smile. Wide. Too wide. He ran for the door, but it wouldn't open. He pounded on it, screaming, "Let me out!" From behind him, the jukebox clicked again, switching tracks. The song changed to something slow, mournful. A voice whispered right by his ear. "Sit down, driver. You're home." He spun around, flashlight trembling in his hand. Marge was standing behind the counter again. Her smile soft but wrong. Her eyes hollow. "You can't leave yet," she said. "Not after coming all this way." I don't belong here," Ethan stammered. She tilted her head. "You do now." The lights flickered. The truckers in the booths all turned their heads toward him at once, their smiles vanishing. Their eyes, black, empty pits, began to weep dark streaks down their cheeks. Ethan backed toward the door, hand on the handle. "Stay back," he whispered. Then, in the reflection of the window, he saw himself, sitting calmly in one of the booths sipping coffee. The reflection smiled at him and lifted its cup. He spun around, but the booth was empty. The jukebox fell silent. When he turned back, the diner was dark again. Empty. No figures. No Marge. No sound but the faint hum of the refrigerator behind the counter. His cup still sat there, half full, steam rising from it. He grabbed his cap, his hands shaking, and stumbled outside. The fog was thicker now, almost glowing in the dim light. He climbed into his truck and started the engine. The radio came on by itself, blaring static before a calm. Familiar voice broke through. "Marge's Diner, Red Mesa Stopover, where the coffee's always hot and the drivers always stay a while." He froze. The same voice, Marge's, now calm and steady, like an old advertisement. "Visit us again soon, Ethan," it said softly through the speaker. "We're always open." He turned the radio off, his breathing ragged. The fog parted slowly, revealing the empty highway ahead. He slammed the accelerator, driving hard until the lights of the truck stop vanished completely. By sunrise, he was 30 miles out, pale and trembling. He stopped at a modern fuel station, desperate to wash his face and get his bearings. The clerk there, a young kid, looked at him funny when Ethan mentioned Red Mesa Stopover. "Red Mesa?" the kid repeated. "Sir, that place was condemned 30 years ago. My dad said they shut it down after a fire. Nobody's worked there since." Ethan stared at him, unable to speak. The kid shrugged. "Weird thing, though. Some nights, truckers say they still see the sign glowing in the fog, like it's waiting for someone." Ethan nodded absently, his throat dry. He looked out at the morning light breaking over the desert, and froze. Across the windshield, faintly etched in dust, were the words, "Come back soon, driver," and beneath it, as if written with a fingertip dipped in coffee, a single ring-shaped stain, still warm. The road stretched endlessly under the dim silver light of the moon, a ribbon of cracked asphalt winding through the flat plains of Oklahoma. The hum of the tires was hypnotic, almost comforting, until Daniel saw the glowing sign ahead, "Rest Easy Truck Plaza, open 24 hours. It flickered weakly, fighting the surrounding darkness. He'd been driving since sundown, eyelids heavy, body aching, thoughts sluggish. He needed fuel, a bathroom, maybe a snack. The clock on the dashboard read 2:47 a.m. He turned off the highway and rolled slowly into the lot. A single gas pump stood under a crooked metal canopy. The convenience store behind it was small, dimly lit, and surrounded by long-abandoned semis and cars that looked like they hadn't moved in years. He noticed the air, unnaturally still, almost muffled, as though sound refused to exist here. Daniel parked beside the pump, killed the engine and stepped out. His boots scraped against the gravel. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, or at least he thought it was a dog. Sounded too deep, too slow. Inside the store, a bell above the door jingled weakly as he entered. The air smelled faintly of mildew and motor oil. The shelves were half empty, the products dusty, faded by time. A row of fluorescent lights flickered overhead, buzzing in uneven rhythm. Behind the counter sat an old man in a trucker's cap, reading a newspaper so yellowed it looked like it might crumble if touched. His name tag read simply Ray. "Evenin'," Daniel said, forcing a smile. Ray looked up slowly, his eyes pale and glassy, his voice gravelly. "Evenin', driver. Long haul?" "Yeah," Daniel said. "Headed west. Just needed to refuel and stretch a bit." Ray nodded. "Ain't much west of here, just open road and bad weather. But you do what you gotta." Daniel smiled politely. "Guess so. You got coffee?" Ray gestured toward the back. "Pot's on the warmer. Help yourself." Daniel poured himself a cup. The coffee was thick, almost black. Bitter. But after 12 hours on the road, it didn't matter. He sipped it, grimacing slightly, and leaned against the counter. "You get a lot of drivers through here?" he asked. Ray chuckled softly, the kind of dry laugh that sounded like it hadn't been used in a long time. "Used to. These days, not so much. Folks avoid this stretch now." Daniel frowned. "Why's that?" Ray's eyes met his. There was something empty behind them, like looking into a dark tunnel. "Accidents. Strange ones. They say people stop here, then don't make it back to the road. Lot of stories. But stories don't stop the road. Do they?" Daniel tried to laugh it off. "Guess not." He finished his coffee, left a few bills on the counter, and headed for the door. But as he stepped outside, the air changed. Heavy, humid, and wrong. His truck lights were still on, but the fog around the lot was thicker now, dense and milky, swallowing everything past 20 feet. He climbed back into the cab, turned the key, nothing. The truck didn't even try to start. Just a low electrical hum like the battery was dying. He cursed under his breath, trying again. Still nothing. Then he caught something in his mirrors, movement. A figure standing just beyond the fog line, still and tall, its outline human but not quite right. Too long in the limbs. Daniel blinked, heart thudding. The figure didn't move. He leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. "Hey!" he called. The fog swirled slightly, and then there were 2 figures. Then 4. Each time he blinked, more appeared, faint shapes moving closer in silence. They circled the truck like shadows, barely visible, but definitely there. He slammed the door locks and grabbed the radio mic. "Breaker. This is westbound 214 calling anyone near Rest Easy Plaza. I've got some weird activity here. Can anyone read me?" Only static. Then, through the static, a voice. Faint, whispering, "Rest easy, driver. You've been on the road too long." His skin went cold. He dropped the mic, fumbling for the ignition again. Desperate. The lights flickered, and then the radio came alive again. This time, the voice was his own. "Rest easy, driver." His breathing turned shallow. He reached for the door, ready to bolt, when a knock came, sharp, deliberate, right beside his head. He froze. The fog was pressed against the window now, as if it had weight. A dark silhouette stood inches away, its head tilting slightly. Slowly, a pale hand pressed against the glass. Long fingers, almost translucent, leaving streaks that looked like condensation but moved, shifting like they were alive. Daniel yelled and started pounding the steering wheel. "Leave me the hell alone." The hand withdrew, replaced by something far worse, his own reflection. But it wasn't copying him. It was smiling. The reflection mouthed something he couldn't hear. Then it lifted a finger to its lips, shhh, before vanishing as the fog swallowed the cab completely. Daniel stumbled out the passenger side, running blindly through the lot, choking on the thick mist. He could barely see his own hands. The world felt smaller, compressed, as if he were trapped inside a tunnel made of cloud and shadow. Somewhere behind him, his truck engine roared to life on its own. Headlights flared through the fog, cutting beams of light across the asphalt. The horn blared, long, shrill, unending. He turned, staring into the blinding light. Someone was sitting in the driver's seat now. Someone that looked exactly like him. The truck lurched forward. He barely dove aside as it barreled past, tires screaming, vanishing into the fog as suddenly as it had come. When silence returned, Daniel lay on the cold pavement, trembling, his pulse racing. The fog began to thin. The lights of dawn slowly crept across the horizon. He looked around. The Rest Easy Plaza was gone. Just flat land and empty road. His truck was nowhere to be seen. He staggered toward the highway, his legs numb, trying to make sense of anything. In the distance, he saw headlights approaching, another rig slowing down. The driver, a woman in her 40s, leaned out. "You all right, man? You look like hell." Daniel's voice was hoarse. "My truck. It just disappeared. There was a station here. Rest Easy." The woman frowned. "Rest Easy? That old stop burned down in the 80s. Nothing's been here since." He stared at her, speechless. She hesitated, then motioned to the passenger seat. "Come on. I'll get you to the next town. You look like you've been through something." Daniel climbed in, still shaking. As the truck pulled back onto the road, he stared out the window and saw in the mirror's reflection his truck again, following. His headlights never dimmed. His driver, still him, still smiling. The woman's voice broke his trance. "You okay, honey?" He turned to answer but froze. She was staring ahead, eyes blank, lips moving silently to the same whisper he'd heard over the radio. "Rest easy, driver. You've been on the road too long." And as the dawn broke across the empty plains, Daniel realized he'd never left that truck stop at all. The night had gone quiet again, too quiet, the kind of silence that carried weight, pressing against the skin and making every breath feel wrong. The highway stretched behind and ahead like a black river. No lights, no movement, just the endless hum of the engine. Caleb's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles pale under the dashboard glow. He hadn't stopped since that last station, didn't dare. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the faces in the rearview mirror. Not his passengers, not even human. Just grinning shapes watching him from the back of the cab. His CB radio crackled softly, breaking the silence. "Breaker 19, anyone still on this road tonight?" A voice murmured, distorted but calm. He swallowed hard before answering. "Yeah, this is Roadrunner westbound, just trying to make it through." The voice replied, faint and almost familiar. "You're already through, driver. Been through for a long time." The static deepened into whispers. His headlights flickered. On the side of the road, a rusted sign appeared for a split second before vanishing into darkness again. It read, "Rest Easy Truck Plaza, always open." Caleb's breath hitched. The radio went silent, but the whisper continued right behind him. The highway stretched endlessly under the gray morning light, calm and empty. A lone truck rolled past, its headlights flickering faintly before fading into the mist. Inside, the CB radio crackled once. A voice whispering, distant and tired. "You ever notice how some stops just disappear?" Then silence. The road swallowed the sound. At mile marker 47, a rusted sign stood crooked in the grass. "Last mile rest, open all night." A faint hum lingered in the air, like an idling engine just beyond the fog. And if you listened closely, you could almost hear the coffee pot still brewing.